Viele Firmen finden es aktuell schwierig, dass sie in dieser Zeit ihre Stimme irgendwo draußen gehört bekommen bzw. Gehör finden bei ihrer jeweiligen Zielgruppe. Und wir haben uns gedacht, dazu laden wir direkt einen Experten ein, der sich genau damit beschäftigt. Steve Bustin ist internationaler Keynote-Redner und Berater, wohnt in Brighton, Experte in UK und weltweit unterwegs. Und wir haben uns mit ihm getroffen für ein Interview. Das Interview wurde in englischer Sprache durchgeführt. In these days, it can be quite challenging to get your voice heard. Getting your voice heard is the tagline of international expert on communication, Steve Bustin, who I'm welcoming for an interview today. Hello, Steve.
Hi there, Niels. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for taking the time, and I'm going to go straight into it. Many companies at the moment struggle to find the right communications, not only because of Corona crisis, but also because of, let's say, due to different political movements where they don't know how should my brand communicate, what should I put out there, how do I communicate properly with my clients? What's your advice on that?
Stop, I think it'd actually be my advice. Stop and think. And I think that's what an awful lot of companies just haven't done over the last few months, is stop, consider, form a strategy, develop a tone of voice, all those sorts of things, and then actually undertake strategic communications. There's been an awful lot of shotgun work going on. It's all very reactive. And I think the companies who are really managing to cut through are those who stopped and thought about what's changed for our customers, and whether that's a business customer or consumer, what's changed for them, what's their reality, and how do we fit into that in terms of the way we communicate with them. And that's channel, that's words, that's the whole lot. So I think most companies at the moment need to stop, just look at what they're doing. Is it working? If it's not, what do they need to change to bring it back on track? And that could be as simple as just the language they're using, whether that's inclusive language, whether it's in the first person or third person, all those sorts of things. But a lot of companies just haven't stopped and thought about how they communicate in the new normal.
So one of the keynotes which I saw you give to a couple of different audiences is how to get engaged. And of course, businesses are interested to get engaged with their probably new and future clients. Still, one of the questions you raise is, do you seek engagement with your audience every time you communicate? How is it possible to do that? Isn't it quite normal that sometimes I communicate in a way where I simply lose some people in due course of communication?
If you're losing people, there really is a problem. I mean, although, sometimes if you're losing people who actually are of no value to you, then that's not necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, you absolutely should be seeking to engage with an audience every time you communicate. And by engage, I mean that communication should be a two-way process. It should be part of a conversation. And this, again, is where an awful lot of organizations struggle, because they're used to just broadcasting, just sending information out in one direction, and they're basically not listening. And an organization that actually cares about its customers and its prospects, and it should be said its staff, and I think this goes just as much for internal comms as it does external, will put themselves in listening mode. What sort of feedback loop do they have in place? How can people contact them? How can people respond? Even if I see an advert, let's say somebody's gone old school and taking an advert in a magazine. If I want to respond to that advert, how do I do it? Is there a hashtag? Is there a Twitter account I can reference? Is there a website I can go to? When people are communicating, even online, are they actually responding to comments that are being left? It's interesting, just looking at Facebook and LinkedIn, you see some brands posting or being tagged, and they're not actually engaging in the conversation, not taking part in discussion. Even if that discussion is wholly positive, they just ignore it and they're not listening. So you do need to know what people are saying about you in order to be able to respond. And I mean, I think people often say, we've got a Google alert running. Google alerts miss so much stuff. If you're serious about wanting to monitor what's going on online, I think you do need to pay. I use mention.com. I think mention.com is a great tool for monitoring what people are saying about you. There's a number of them around. Talkwater's another one. But you've got to know what people are saying about you in order to be listening, and that's how you build engagement. If people feel that you as an organization are not listening to them, they will go elsewhere very fast. And I suppose, just going back to what you said about, is it okay if you're losing people? It's okay if you're losing people because what you're saying isn't relevant to them, and actually they're never going to be a customer. But if you're losing them because what you're saying isn't relevant to them and they could have been a customer, there's a problem. And you need to start measuring why you're losing people, and actually starting to do something about it. And again, a lot of companies will just go, oh, we put out this email, nobody opened it. And it's like, okay, what's the problem? Is it the subject line? Is it the format? Is it when you send it? Is it actually you're sending it to the wrong people? Or is it that your emails are so dull that nobody bothers opening it anymore?
So when we talk about listening to your customers, and of course I prepared for this interview, people said we want to listen to our customers, but especially with social media, it's just too much work. We just can't handle the workload. How to deal with this?
It's tricky. I mean, in some ways, it's a nice problem to have. If people are talking about you to the extent that you can't track it, there's a nice problem to have. And I get it. For a small business, it is tough to keep up with it. But quite frankly, if you're a larger business, particularly if you're a consumer-facing brand, you need to have the resources to do it. And it's very easy to outsource those resources now. It doesn't even necessarily need to be in-house, although I do think it needs to be intrinsic to your comms and PR team. But
yes,
in this day and age, I mean, just saying we don't have time to listen to our customers. I mean, that's what you're saying. We don't have to build, we don't have time to look at this. But there are so many tools out there that will provide instant feedback or a daily update of what people are saying about you. They can measure whether it's positive, whether it's negative. I just think it's an excuse that big organizations can't get away with. If you're a small organization, it is trickier. And I do think that's where a tool like mention.com would help, because it means that, every morning I get an email in my inbox that just says, here are the mentions we found of you in the last 24 hours. And it mentions things like Twitter and blogs, and if somebody's referenced me in a blog post or something, for instance, when this podcast goes live, I know I will get a notification. So I know that I can then go and I can respond if other people have commented, I can share it. And so, you've got to have some sort of monitoring tool in place. Don't feel that you have to now log into Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram and TikTok and all the other platforms to try to work out what people are saying about you. It can all be automated and incredibly quickly and actually remarkably cheaply. So I don't think it's an excuse anymore, and you need to be doing it.
Excellent. Now, of course, some brands will say, we listen to our customers and we have events for that. But at the moment, we have COVID-19 in place. So these events can't take place anymore. And online, does it really work? You're an international host of events. And I saw you hosting events in different countries, and it always worked very well. What is your take on this kind of, we go online and then it should work that way?
You cannot take an offline event online and expect it to work.
So it doesn't work?
Not just taking an ordinary offline event, no, because they are different formats. In the same way that if you took a 200-person event and moved it into a 20,000-person arena, it wouldn't work because you're in a different format. It's a different type of platform. You would have to adapt accordingly. And the same is true of moving online. Events online are different. On the whole, they need to be shorter. They need to be punchier. And they're actually, on the whole, they're noisier. Because people have got the option, if you're using a tool like Zoom, people have got the option to actually contribute, over their audio. Well, even when you've got chat boxes running and things, there's a lot of interaction, which I think is a good thing. I certainly don't fight that. And certainly when I'm hosting online events, you can have 4 or 5 different input devices or channels open for people to be passing information to you. And it's quite exciting. And I think that's the thing. A lot of brands just go, oh, no, we want to go face-to-face. If people can't experience our product or our service or our brand face-to-face, they won't buy it. And it's like, well, actually, in this day and age, if your brand or product or service doesn't work as well online as it does off, you've got a problem. And I think here, part of this is this last few months has really forced some people to reconsider their digital work. But I'm still hearing an awful lot of people saying, oh, this is what we do online until we can go offline. Or I've heard people saying, well, we've got this online business and then we've got this offline business. And it's like, no. I think you need to drop those descriptors. It is no longer online and offline business. It is business. You're just using different channels to deliver. And I don't think that when lockdown is finally released and when we maybe have a vaccine for COVID-19, I don't think we are going to go back to purely offline if that's the only way your business is operating. people's expectations have changed, and you've got to have a digital offering. And if people, can't find you and can't interact with you on a digital platform, and if you can't explain your brand and your product or service in the same way on a digital platform, you've got a real problem. And I think the next 5 years are going to be very, very difficult for you.
And then, of course, because I saw that you deliver a presentation training as well, I have a very special question, not only by one, but basically by 9 out of 10 board level people who I spoke before when I prepared for this interview. They say, we are going online. And I think my speaking suddenly, although they often think I am quite talented, I have the experience, but suddenly it doesn't really work. It feels like I speak and I use the same techniques, but it somehow doesn't really reach people anymore. What do I do wrong? What are your tips on how to improve speaking when you suddenly have online events instead of having all the people in the same room?
I think the first thing is to understand, as I said just now, that you're on a different platform. And what you were doing offline, that 45-minute keynote that you might have done in front of a room full of several thousand people, isn't necessarily going to work online. It's a different platform and needs an adjustment. For example, a 45-minute keynote-style presentation online is a bit dull. When people are sat at their desk at home, or maybe in a remote office, sitting there watching just somebody talk, possibly with or without slides, is just a bit dull. So on the whole, I think the presentations that are being successful are shorter, sharper, more interactive. So, I've seen some very effective use of even just things like the polling functions on Zoom, or using Mentimeter or Slido or one of those sorts of tools. And I think people respond to that sort of interaction. They need it. One of the things you have to be aware of as a presenter is, at the moment, now we're all sat at home, the opportunity for distraction is extraordinary. I'm sat here at my desk at home at the moment. In front of me, I've got my phone, I've got my iPad, I've obviously got the laptop that I'm using. I've also got a really lovely view out the window. My dog is asleep on the floor behind me. The distractions around me are huge. And so actually a presenter who wants to engage with me has got to break through those distractions. And they're going to do that by being sharp and punchy, by interacting with me, getting me involved. Whether that's asking questions, whether that's voting on things. I'm not just going to sit and listen, or if I am, I'm going to be half listening because I'm going to be multitasking. I'm going to be doing other things. I might be checking my emails. I might be planning what I'm going to have for dinner tonight. So you've got to keep it shorter, sharper, punchier. And also, the energy is very different. Talking to camera is exhausting. And quite frankly, if you're delivering a session online and you don't come off it really tired, there's something wrong. And there's lots of research being done, and I suspect Graham Jones talked to you about this when you spoke to him last week.
Zoom fatigue.
Yeah, Zoom fatigue, absolutely. And this fact that we are having to work harder to read other people when we are online, because we're not getting quite the same verbal and visual cues that we expect when we're in the room with somebody. So, you have
Excellent.
Sorry, go for it.
No, keep going, please.
Okay, so I'm just going to say you have to really up the energy. There's a few really small things that I think make a difference. There's obviously the thing about eye line. You've got to make sure that the camera you're talking to is at your eye line. So you're not looking down at it, you're not looking up at it, because nobody wants to view up your nostrils. Thank you very much. But actually, if you can get your laptop or whatever camera you're using up high, I'd say stand. The energy you have when you're standing is quite different. And it allows you to move more. I have a couple of times, if I have done slightly longer sessions, I'll move between the two. I'll have two setups, and I can just I'll either have a separate camera, or I'll move my laptop halfway through and go from standing to sitting, or vice versa. And it just is a nice way to change the energy and gives it variety. If you're doing the same thing at the same level and the same pitch and the same type of energy for 45 minutes, people are going to switch off. So make sure you're varying it. And it might be as simple as saying, right, let's see who's asked a question in the Q&A box at this point. Okay, I'm going to answer these 2 or 3 questions, and now I'm going to carry on my content, and you'll have a chance to ask more questions in a minute. And it's just, it's variety, it's pace. People will get bored and get distracted very fast. So, you've got to mix it up a bit. Don't assume that 45-minute keynote with beautiful slides that would have worked in a room full of people is going to work online, because it won't.
Excellent. And of course we have, because that question popped up quite quite a lot. People ask for best practices, and I know that you are the president of the Professional Speaking Association of the United Kingdom and Ireland, and you just decided to move your annual conference from on-site to online. And now, of course, people like to know what are the most important aspects to take care of when we decide to do our first online events, because many people say we would like to do online events, we're just all very scared to do something wrong.
There is no wrong, because actually I was going to say there is no right. That's not completely true. But actually, we've got the opportunity here to reinvent events, conventions, conferences, away days, team days, whatever you want to call them. And actually, I would say this is a good opportunity to look and think, why do we hold this event? What's the purpose? What's the objective? And how can we best serve that? So, for example, with the Professional Speaking Association's convention, we know that people do come to hear and see speakers clearly and learn from them. But a lot of it is about having time in the corridor, or in the bar, or in the restaurant with their colleagues and friends. So we know that when we run this online event, we have to have networking and chat and social spaces online. And there are some really excellent platforms now available that enable you to do this. People can drop in and out of different networking chats. They can go and visit exhibitor stands or sponsor stands, all these sorts of things. So we can focus on the things that are important to our members. And actually, that also allows us to jettison maybe some of the legacy stuff that, we've just been doing it that way just because that's how we've always done it. So I think even when we do go back to having offline events, and I'm sure we will, I really hope that by next year we're able to have in-person conventions. I think they will change because of what we've learned by taking it online. But you do have to really consider what actually does my audience want and what's our objective for doing this. If it's really just about bringing people together and allowing people to feel like a team or feel like a group of colleagues or friends, then actually maybe just letting them sit and watch speaker after speaker after speaker isn't the way to go. I hope that organizations are really taking this opportunity to grab new ideas and to really examine critically what they've done previously. And again, don't just try to take offline stuff online, because it won't work. It's a different platform.
Excellent. This is perfect advice. And of course, I'm going to put your contact data in the show notes of this podcast so people can get in touch with you if they have any additional aspects which they like to talk about. So to wrap this all up, there's only one thing I have left to say. Steve, thank you very much for your time.